Welcome to The Power of Culture. I'm Al-Mayasa bint Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani. My nation, Qatar, is on a creative journey supporting the talents of a rising generation, reaching out to other countries through the arts and building an entire cultural infrastructure. In each episode of The Power of Culture, I'm joined by a leading artist or architect, philanthropist or museum professional who is part of Qatar's journey. Listen in as we discuss what the power of culture can do. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the Pritzker Prize winning architect Alejandro Aravena of the firm ELEMENTAL. Hi, Alejandro.
Hey, hello.
Hi. You have been to Doha several times now, and most recently with the opening of the Liwan Design Residencies.
Mm-hmm.
And over the space of time, you have seen the evolution of the country. What inspires you each time you come to be committed to such an important project as the art mill in Qatar?
Well, I would say that cities reflect societies in a very direct and concrete way. And what I've witnessed, it's a progressive opening of industrial facilities towards public spaces or transformation into cultural spaces. And that's very not only inspiring, but actually very challenging. And it's a whole transformation of the city in relationship with nature, with the ocean, and with the city itself.
I remember before you were selected for the art mill, you're already shortlisted as one of the finalists. But I remember you curated the Venice Biennale.
Uh-huh.
Was that in 2018?
16.
Oh, 16. And then you got this year, actually, you chaired the Pritzker Prize. So you've really done it all, Alejandro. And I want you to speak a little bit about the experience you had in competing for the Art Mill competition, because, we had unexpectedly, we had almost 500 applicants for this museum, and you were one of the 25 finalists, and then the two finalists between you and Adam Khan. Talk a little bit about that experience.
Well, you said that we have done it all. Well, not really. We have never done a museum. This is going to be the first time.
well, almost. This will be your first time. But I mean, you've gotten all the the Venice Architectural Biennale is a big credit to the work that you've done. And chairing the Pritzker Prize is a very prestigious thing. So I know this will be your first museum, which is really, for us, a great motivation to do something different for the 21st Century Museum. But I'm very curious to know how it felt for you as an architect going through this competition for an area where you've never done, like the museums.
Well, I think that goes very much to the point of the whole initiative of this museum. I mean, it's going into unexplored fields. For even for you, we're reusing industrial facilities and transforming them into a cultural district. Us ourselves never done a museum, and I guess this requires a combination of knowing a lot about your subject, and therefore from the very beginning we're teaming with people that know a lot, from structural engineers, environmental engineers, and of course on the museum side. But it's I guess in our own practice we normally go into things that we not necessarily know about, and by doing so, if you're rigorous with that approach, then you don't take anything for granted. And I guess that's what we systematically did in the competition, trying to ask ourselves, well, why not do this? Why not do that? And I guess that arrived to a synthesis of the project that we were first of all, very surprised that we have won, but consequently very happy. But yes, I guess that the process itself was unusual. A lot of meetings. I mean, instead of guessing what a jury or what a client might want, there was a lot of dialogue. And I guess that for complex project, that's absolutely necessary. And that's being very distinctive from this project. It has been a process of dialogue. It takes time, of course. If there's any power in architecture, that's the power of synthesis. The more complex the question, the more the need for synthesis. And I guess that the dialogue is what allows us as designers to not leave any force that is relevant outside of the equation.
No, I remember the jury was very fascinated by the way you approached things and thought about things, and you entered a proposal and then proposed something else and then went back to the original. And that's what I think was so fascinating to see. Alejandro, you had very bold and clear ideas for the museum from the very beginning. And then the second stage, you changed a little bit your design. And after feedback from the jury, you went back to your original idea in terms of reusing the existing building and how it can function as a museum to accommodate the brief that we shared. Tell us a little bit about that process in terms of an architect and for the aspiring architects who are listening in.
Well, I think they're described right. There were several stages. In between stage 2 and 3, we kind of maybe misinterpreted the comments of the jury. So when we went to present and we unveiled the model that we had, the whole jury looked in awe. But what did you do? Why did you change? Well, we said, because you said so. Not really. And I guess these are the moments where you would have to question yourself, okay, let's go back to the first intuition. And I think professional intuition plays a big role in nowadays questions for the built environment, not just for this museum, which is a very challenging project. But normally, we will have to move ahead only with partial certainties, only with unclear certainties on your own side, and yet have to organize the information in a proposal key. The question of being bold, I would say it was something that we had to address in a very radical way. With the climate emergency that we're living, there were some structures that in the first phase we say, well, we saved some of the silos, they were quite spectacular, but we're not sure about the rest of the structures there. After a visit, then we understood that there was a lot of embedded energy there, and it's a message that we're sending. I mean, it's not just for environmental reasons that we restudy the whole pre-existence of the site and try to keep as many of the structures as possible, but also for the history of the project. I mean, the relationship with the public, with spaces, is not just a rational, technical way. It also has symbolic values. And I guess that we understood that these intangible dimensions of the human conditions are part of the equation. You have to explain in a very clear and concrete way what can be measured. But those intangible dimensions are part of the question as well. And that's, I guess, that led us to make it as clear as possible. As a consequence, it may look bold, but what we're looking all the time is this project pertinent? Is this formal translation of the forces at play that we identified, is the case for this place? And of course, when you're in front of the ocean, inside an iconic location, when you understand the complexity of the exhibition spaces, together with this small city, this was actually maybe the tipping point when we understood, even ourselves, not just how we explained it to the jury, is this a big building or a small city? And when you understand that it's actually both, they not necessarily follow the same dynamic. In a big building, you have to control and be very rigorous about details because it's a very protected environment for a very valuable collection. But cities has a different dynamic. They have to allow a lot of other stakeholders to enter the equation. And this balance between controlling and opening the process and allowing other forces to take over was maybe, but that's why there's the need for clarity and simplicity. That's the only way to channel the forces at play.
I like how you talk about the relationship with the building and the public, because that's something we are essentially introducing this fall very soon with the exhibition openings for Art Mill 2030, which will actually take place at the operational flour mills. You know, I remember when we had the John Neville National Museum, before anything was installed, we allowed the public to engage with the building as an architectural experience. And internally, we had a lot of discussions. Should we do it? Should we not do it? And then we decided that we were going to do it because we wanted the public to engage with the building as an architectural experience. And, you know, this a little bit reminds me of that, because for the very first time, the public will be able to visit the flour mills, our future site. And once the museum opens, it will be a very different experience of the same building. Tell me what you anticipate the viewers to feel when they come visit these two exhibitions. from an architectural point of view, what do you anticipate from the viewers when they come to see our exhibitions at the Art Mill building or site?
Well, I think you've just used a very important word, the public to feel. And I will go back to the question of the Venice Biennale. Again, another moment where we have never curated anything before, and yet we went from zero directly into the Venice Biennale. And again, when you jump into that void, you want to listen to people that know a lot. And I remember it was another tipping point when talking to the president at the time of the Venice Biennale, Paolo Baratta. He said that, look, guys, there's several ways to acquire knowledge. Of course, the intellectual one, you read things, it's a mental thing. But in an exhibition, you acquire knowledge through experience, through emotions. So that's why the notion of creating an experience and not just, let's say, a concept was important. And this was actually something we wanted to do at this exhibition at the Flour Mills. We're actually building a one-to-one scale footprint of a silo of 8.4 meter diameter. Because even for ourselves, I mean, we very rarely experience a silo from within, yet it's a fantastic space. Of course, for a different purpose, for structural efficiency of an industrial facility, yet it has a potential as an experience. And because it's so unique, we wanted the public to be able to experience that. So what the public will see there is this round shape with the flour mill container, what is there available on site already. And I think it will be a good test, even for us, to see, okay, what does this space allow? And of course, in addition to the trajectory of the project, the variations, the evolution, the moments of doubt, when you came back, what you were referring before. I mean, we were going in one direction, then we came back. And I think all those, the history of a project may be very useful for other practitioners to see how you have to be faithful to your original idea, yet at the same time incorporate new information along the process.
You know, Alejandro, whenever you send me a sketchbook, I get very excited because your drawings are so superb. And when you do your presentations, it's quite incredible how you think. And I saw the catalog for the exhibition that you just described. I really look forward to seeing it. You know, the fire station is a good example for us of a repurposed civil defense building to an artist in residency. And there's always this notion of nostalgia for people who have been to the building as children, visiting the civil defense building and suddenly re-experiencing it as something different. We've discussed many forms or many elements that we want to keep of the building. The silos, for example, the smell of the bakery. What forms of nostalgia do you think visitors will keep after we repurpose the building to house our collection of modern contemporary art?
Well, to be fair, the question of the smell was something that you suggested. And once we saw, when we went to the site, of course, that's very relevant. I mean, maybe not a lot of people have seen the silos and the industrial operation, yet from the public spaces around, you can smell the place. And that's another dimension that we architects tend to very rarely incorporate in our designs. It's not only, I mean, it first of all talks about a program. What are you doing in this place? And it's not just the museum. We are trying to keep reasons why people should come back, and an everyday bakery of how bread is produced for the whole country in this particular place. It's relevant to the people, but it's relevant also to the history. And this is the question of nostalgia. I guess is the more we share a common purpose, then the more as a society we can move forward. We in Chile are maybe suffering from that kind of cultural crisis, not just a political, social crisis. But I guess that we have not paid enough attention to culture and to history. What makes us be together as a society? So the more we keep history, and it's not necessarily just, let's say, the cultural history or the art. I mean, industrial facilities are part of that. And I guess that when people go to the Corniche to enjoy a nice evening with the families, eventually they may go into the exhibition, but it's going to be a shared experience. And the importance of the public space in between the old industrial facilities, I guess, is crucial. More than half of the square meters of this building are not just for the museum. It's mainly a part of the city that was previously closed when it was used as an industrial port. Now it's open.
Yes, and we have an amazing new cruise destination that used to be our old port. So there'll be a lot of visitors coming through towards the art mill and the Islamic Art Museum. You talk about smell. A lot of our exhibitions now incorporate the sense of smell. We have an exhibition that we're opening at the Al Riwaq of the Lusail Museum that will also incorporate smell and perfume. But you talk about an interesting, the public, the space. You spoke earlier about the culture village or the creative industry village that you have placed in your original plan. And that was an idea you had from the very beginning. You always had this village right adjacent to the museum, which was really fascinating. Talk a little bit about this idea about the creative village and how you thought about it, why you thought about it, because as architects, before entering this competition, you were invited to Qatar, you visited all of our landmarks, you explored the country's different landscapes. What inspired you to think about the creative village?
Well, cities are measured for what you can do in them for free. So the moment you're adding to the public space, to the public experience, and that creative village it connects to what was done before in the transformation of the seaside with the Corniche promenade, that definitely here has a very significant point. We did two things actually with that. One that was maybe not there. Well, it was suggested there, which is a new height. The creative village is a very gentle slope that accumulates height because we're in front of the ocean, in front of the horizon, and there's something very attractive, and people that kind of can't prevent from going up a slight hill and from there have a bigger horizon. That's why we're moving from the south to the north end, and then when you arrive there, there's this kind of artificial cliff created by nature at a 3% slope. I mean, you may not even notice yet at some point you're 17 meters above the sea level, and that's very, as an urban experience, it adds to the richness of the Corniche. But how to do that specifically? We studied quite a bit the old Doha footprint, because you would like to domesticate a harsh environment through natural means, and there's a lot of wisdom in how this has been done over time. The narrow streets, the shade created by the architecture, the ventilation and the capturing of the prevailing winds, all that adds to a comfortable, nice, memorable public experience of the space. So it's a combination of these two things, something that wasn't there, so that it adds to the whole experience of Doha, but based on old wisdom that was there. I mean, if people have lived in this environment from quite a while, well, better pay attention to what was learned there. And there were many lessons actually in the old Doha footprint that we wanted to incorporate into this new creative village.
No, indeed, that elevated bridge is quite an interesting element of the building, and also really interesting with the James Corner Park that we launched the Flag Plaza this week, and there's going to be a pedestrian bridge that will link the Islamic Art Museum Park to the National Museum, and the art mill will create this triangle. And you said something very interesting, very interesting in your last presentation about triangles and how these three museums create that space for the public. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's very important. I'm thinking about this right now. When you have a public experience of being slightly up, a new city appears. The MIA Museum by Pei has this gentle slope, and when you're in front of the entrance, you can look back into the city and are already about 50 meters above the conventional ground level. And from there, then you see where you are, you orient yourself, you look at your own city with different eyes. And what's visible at the moment is the National Museum of Qatar by Jean Nouvel. So by taking advantage, and this is a combination as usual of many reasons, not always just one reason, when we slightly go up in a public condition, that is kind of, we are using what Pei did in that museum, we're able to look back, and now there's 3 institutions that are creating this cultural district. So it's the whole city that is arriving to the ocean in a complete different fashion. So that's one thing. And the other one, it's regarding what are these different museums offering? And as you said, the connection, the visual connection, the pedestrian connection above the street level, all that is part of what we wanted to achieve, so that you communicate that you're not alone in this cultural enterprise. There are many institutions trying to add to that common purpose of a society. It's a new view of the world, and this comes from history, from the Islamic tradition, from the history of Qatar itself, and now from the art and creative village that will be added by this museum to the other 2 existing institutions close by.
Alejandro, from the very, very beginning, the silos was always like the main identity of the building. And now we're also using it as our main identity for the logo. Why do you think the silos from an architectural point of view are important to preserve? One of the key things we've tried to do with our work, and which is why we chose this site, we could have requested a site that's just a land that we would build a new building from scratch, which is always much easier than repurposing an existing building. So why, in your opinion, was it very important for you to keep the silos? And in fact, many of the architects who entered this competition also preserved the silos. I'd love to hear from you about the silos in the building.
Well, I guess that one of the things that an architect would like to do is that the buildings last. That they last physically, but also culturally, that they, for future generations, keep on making sense. And when you study those architectures from the past that are still with us, that are still valid, and maybe in art, the notion of progress doesn't make a lot of sense, unlike in science, for example, where things become obsolete. In art, what you're adding is just a different point of view, but those old buildings are still valid culturally. And what all these buildings, when one studies this kind of icons of architecture, what they have in common, it's a very clear and simple structure. So this old industrial facility was fascinating. I remember when we received the brief for the competition, the front page had the plan of the silos. And it looked as a very abstract way of organizing. You couldn't even know what it was, yet geometrically speaking, it was very fascinating. When you double click on that, then you understand there's a potential in that to work as a DNA for a future construction, even for a use that's not necessarily a museum. So it has some qualities that are timeless that we wanted at least to, build on top of that for this new building. But then when you go specifically into the museum, then you understand that sometimes you have rooms that are specifically dedicated to a work of art, and then you create a sense of intimacy. But in other moments, you may need to have very large rooms for contemporary creations. And the silo, by definition, are very good by separating, and that's the original purpose, different weights in a very efficient way. But what do we do if we need to add more modules and we need to build bigger spaces? And that's why, based on the silos, this may be a very technical thing, but the silo, it's a structure that outside is an octagon and then inside is a circle. And then you group them and it works very nice for that purpose. But we added a slight transformation, which is we start at the bottom of the silos as a square, and we arrive on top to an octagon as the old silos. But the more you approach to the square, then the easier it is to achieve a grid that in case you need larger, more flexible spaces, then you can have them. And that we understood very early on was crucial for hosting a collection that is going to be in permanent change. There's a very dynamic condition for exhibition spaces. So it's based on what was existing there, but yet adding something that prepares it in a proper way for this new use.
And Alejandro, the exhibition that you're organizing now on the architecture, how much of the building will you show in the exhibition? Are you going to be unveiling everything? When considering this exhibition, what did you consider to show for the public at this point?
Well, I think it's you don't want to create false expectations, and we want to be, all of us, I mean, I include you in this, we've been very serious and rigorous in how to move ahead. So you want to be very careful in not creating expectations that then you will not be able to fulfill from a technical point of view. We have to study the structure, the ground, and how the foundations are going to work, and all that. So we just show what we are confident that will be able to be part of the future development of the design. But the other thing we wanted to do, and that is very important, let's put it this way. Architects have a very tough task in showing the original. When you go to an art exhibition, you see the piece, what the artist, what the author created. We architects can only communicate a kind of representation of what will be in the future, this kind of promise of what the building will be in the future. And the closest thing to an original are the sketches, are the internal cooking of the project. So we are sharing all that, all the sketches, all the hesitations, all that, the moment where you weren't in that direction, then you changed your mind for good reasons and went backward. And I guess that may be the equivalent of an original in art, plus that notion of the experience. Of course, what is going to be presented there arrived to the point that was presented in the last meeting we had there. And already in that meeting, we anticipated, okay, we have another step to do. And so we already have newer versions of further development of the design, yet what is shown there is what we're all comfortable that was agreed and was shared. These projects are very big enterprises. It's not just your own thing. You have to convey many forces, and I guess that this agreement of the stage that is going to be shown in the exhibition, it's something that we are very confident that maybe may communicate to the public what this design is going to look like in the future.
You know, gardens have become more and more important as part of the museum's planning and public space. And again, you spent a lot of time and energy on the ecology and the gardens around the museums. Say a little bit more about your approach. I mean, how did you consider the gardens, given the bridge that takes you into the museum, given that the museum is positioned around the sea? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I may start by talking about our own relationship from Chile to Qatar. You know, on the one hand, it's a different culture. It's a new thing for us. At the same time, it's very familiar. You know, Chile is a 5,000 kilometer long, very thin country, but half of the country is a desert. So the desert condition is something that well, first of all, I'm very fond of. The places that I like the best in Chile are the ones in the north, in the desert. So there was something familiar when we went there to Qatar. And what you learn is that the landscape, it has many different layers. We were thinking for the landscape as different strata. So in the upper level that is exposed directly to the sun and radiation and winds, it's a more mineral landscape. And the moment you move further into the creative village at the ground level, where the corniche goes into this neighborhood, you begin to find these more shaded spaces, the more delicate and intimate scale of the gardens, for which there's a huge tradition in the Islamic world. And again, so this is a transition from geology and this kind of mineral approach to the cultivated garden of the Islamic tradition that you will find in a very, let's say, casual and organic way while moving through the created neighborhood.
You know, you recently presented your project to His Highness, and you left very impressed by his vision. What impressions, did you get from your presentation to the government most recently?
Well, I have to confess that when you present at that high level, chief of governments and dignitaries, I mean, they're very careful with their reactions. I guess that they're already anticipating. I mean, look, I like this idea, but I have to be responsible with the other enterprises of a country. But from the body language, I guess that you could tell that he was enthusiastic. And maybe the reason is that we were trying to not only have a clear vision or a proposal for our own design, but there's a big view of Qatar as a country. And it's a natural match that you are adding to a vision that started even before us. We received that as part of the competition brief. And I guess that this is the moments where you understand that the circle is closed and then things kind of aligned in a direction that makes sense to everybody.
I think you're referring to Vision 2030,
yes.
And we're hoping to have our museum open by 2030 to complete our 25-year plan. Mm-hmm. And I have one more question for you, Alejandro.
Sure.
What is the legacy you would like to leave being the first museum you've built in a region you've never built in? There's so many firsts in this project for you. You just said it was the first time you ever curated an exhibition at the Venice Biennale. I didn't realize that, but you had such an amazing curatorial exhibition at the Biennale in Venice. When I saw it, I didn't even realize you're one of our finalists at that time because I wasn't aware or familiar with your work. So what is the legacy that you would like to leave behind for yourself and your company?
These are the kind of questions that I would put into the bucket of the unspeakable certainties. Those type of things that but it's very hard to express with words. But if I have to make the effort of finding the right words, and here it's a very delicate issue because on the one hand, the words may be too big and then you may sound arrogant. On the other hand, if you don't have a clear view of why you're going to spend a lot of time, energy and resources in something that is going to be built there, then why even make it? I would say that the question of being able to make sense today to a society, but also for societies and people in the future, that lasting condition of buildings, that's something that we would always, it's secretly in our, let's say, agenda. Do something that makes sense now and then will keep on making sense in the future. It has a very, let's say, a concrete dimension in the sense that you would like to physically resist and more the buildings that we're doing have the structure as the architecture. When you look at the architecture of the past, what remained there is the structure. And in contemporary architecture, the structure wants in one direction and then the finishing or the envelopes on the enclosure goes in a different one. We wanted those two match in a single operation. If you're able to physically last, then you may have the chance to also culturally last. And the question of if you're spending energy, spend it only once, and people like the building, so they take care of the building and they feel as if it was always part of their own environment, then we may have a chance to fall into that category. That maybe it's very vague, but that's in the back of our minds when we're placing the pen in the paper. In my case, I'm sketching. I'm very, very non-digital, but also with all the state-of-the-art resources that we're using with this project. That you make sure that if you make a move, that move has to make sense, and if it makes sense, it will last, and if it will last, then we may fall in the category of the timelessness.
Well, you've put very high expectations with that, so I'm glad to hear that you'll be putting all your energies and resources into this project. I'm really looking forward and the development of the project in the next few years. So Alejandro, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great day.
Bye
Take
bye.
care. Thank you, Alejandro. Bye bye.
Ciao.